We now proceed to the Fianna Fáil. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan, I understand. Minister's speech. I beg your pardon? A copy of the Minister's speech.
I'm sure it's available through the usual channels. My apologies if it isn't.
It may be on the way. Maybe on the way. Okay. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan, who I understand is sharing.
That's correct. I'm going to speak for 5 minutes, and my 4 colleagues are going to share 10 minutes between them, if that's okay with you.
Thank you.
At the outset, Cahirla, can I say that the consequences of the global lockdown of 2020 are at present fully unknown. There are some aspects of it that we can see how damaging they've been, such as the damage to our economy and indeed the damage to our medical systems and people's health. However, there are other repercussions of which we are still unaware. I spoke previously in this House about my concern about the impact the lockdown is having on children and young people. But another area where it is having significant impact is in the whole area of domestic violence and domestic abuse. I think we are unaware at this stage of the full extent of the lockdown on domestic violence in this country. Regrettably, it appears to be the case that there has been a significant increase in domestic violence since the lockdown commenced. I think we need to state that it must be a nightmare for any woman, and to a large extent and by a significant majority it is women, to find themselves living in an abusive relationship, in an abusive and violent environment. That problem is accentuated when you think of the lockdown which has just occurred, because women in that situation now find themselves at home in their houses, in their flats, with their abusive partner who now has nowhere to go out to and who probably is consuming alcohol at home. We know that there is a high correlation between alcohol consumption and domestic abuse, and I think we have to be extremely vigilant to ensure that the state and the services funded by the state are available for women who are victims of domestic violence. Earlier this morning, the Minister and Deputy Kenny was here as well, and Deputy O'Gorman. We spoke about the impact of gangland crime in our society and how dangerous it is. I think we should also recall that the Garda Commissioner reminded us at the end of last year that in the last 3 years, the rate of homicides for domestic violence is in a 2-to-1 proportion to those homicides for gangland violence. So this is a problem as significant as gangland violence, and still, however, I don't think the state is responding adequately to it. I also want to recognise what is contained within the new programme for government that may be ratified by the membership of the Green Party, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in coming days. Because irrespective of whether other people in the House don't want to see it ratified, there's a section in that on domestic violence with which I think every person and every party in this House would agree. And it sets out at page 86 of the programme that there is an epidemic of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence in this country. I think it is important that we recognise that in this House, because unless we recognise the extent of the problem, we won't be able to respond to it. The Minister was correct in referring to the very brave daughters of James O'Reilly, who was recently convicted. They went through a horrific experience for very large parts of their lives. It is astonishing that he was able to get away with that for a period of 20 years without his crimes being brought to the attention of the state and the prosecution authorities. I think we need to learn from that, and we need to ensure that structures are in place so that women can know where to go to in order to avail of the protection of the state when it comes to being domestically abused. I also received a very interesting email from Emma Reedy, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Eveness, which is one of 39 Safe Ireland domestic violence member services across the country. And she makes the point about how we need a whole-of-government approach to responding to domestic violence. She's seeking to have a minister appointed to deal with the issue of domestic violence. That was discussed at talks It is something, however, that I think is potentially a good idea, because at present part of the problem is that responsibility for domestic violence is spread over a variety of different departments. And as I'm sure Minister Flanagan will be aware, it's a responsibility that must extend beyond justice. So I think we need to recognise the extent of this problem. We need to recognise that it has increased during the lockdown, and we as a state have to have the responsibility to ensure that we respond adequately to it. Thank you.